Welcome back to Riding Unicorns. Today we have Manny Medina, founder of Paid.ai and previously founder and CEO at Outreach, and I think is now an exec chairman role. Manny, you can tell us what the status is there. But it's great to have you on, Manny. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to start with asking if you could just explain what an agent is, because we're going to use the word agent a lot in this episode, and then what Paid.ai is building to help advance the agentic era.
So an agent is a piece of software that does work autonomously. And you sort of expect it to complete a task that was otherwise done by a human. And it's done autonomously or with the input of a human being, but the input of a human being is not necessary for the agent to perform its task.
Perfect. That's why I wanted you to introduce it, because it's a perfect explanation. And so what is Paid.ai doing to help advance the agentic era?
So before I answer the question, I need to answer the question like, how do we came about Paid.ai and why does Paid.ai exist? So when I was building agents at Outreach, I realized that there were two things that were happening. One is that the agents were performing way more tasks than was allowable by the seed monetization that we're in. Meaning the agent was, booking meetings, generating pipeline, running compete playbooks. They were running expansions, and all those things were actually replacement, partial or complete replacements of our role. And I remember this call clearly with the CEO of DocuSign. And he asked me, Manny, how many fewer people do I need next year to hit the same number? And I realized that, I was building my own contraction event. And this train is only moving in one direction. And I couldn't capture the value that I was generating with these agents. And when I asked my team to look into all the ways we can monetize it, they came back and everything is difficult in terms of the monetization stack that we have built on top of the financial stack that we had built. So that was insight number one. And then insight number two was the variability of the cost of running those agents. So agents consume tokens, but we charge on a fixed rate. So there was clearly a gap between how customers are used to paying for a recurring revenue service versus how agents actually work. And that framing didn't exist in the world of you pre-buy all these credits with LUS, you can buy the machine, you can buy the storage, there's all these things that you can do. But tokens were rather expensive and unfungible. So the third piece of the equation was that they run in the background. So now you're looking at a piece of software that runs in the background that doesn't need a seed. Who's going to success that? Who's going to tell the customer of all the work that you have done for you? Because there's no user experience for these agents. So how do you run a pilot and show success? And how do you run the business and equip your CSMs or your account organization to make sure that they are showing their customer that you deliver this value? So there was just so much wrong with the world to that point that was not matching where the business was going that I decided to just...
I think before we get into the meat of this episode, we should just hear a bit more about your career, Manny, because most of our listeners, if not all of them, will have heard of Outreach and the huge success that it was. But, you scaled Outreach from nothing to, I think, maybe over 250 million ARR, $4 billion valuation. Tell us about that journey.
Yeah. So it has milestones. So we went from 0 to million in ARR, 2 to 10 million in ARR, 10 to 25 million in ARR, 25 to 50, 50 to 100, and then, all the way to 50.
Are you talking about each year? Are they year milestones?
Yeah, those are the yearly milestones. And every year is sort of like a different chapter, a completely different chapter. So 0 to 2, I was selling a lot of early days of Outreach, door to door, and then hire, my first VP of sales, and he came in on commission only because I didn't have money to pay him a regular salary. To imagine the conversation that he has to go to have with his wife, that hey, babe, I'm about to take this job that doesn't pay me any salary. Meaning if I don't make a sale, I don't get paid. So it was rather it was early days, and you have to believe in what we build and you have to believe in the potential. And eventually, he became our VP of sales, but it was exciting, selling something that didn't exist. That was 0 to 2, and then 2 to 10 was all about building the category. So what do you call this thing? It's a workflow for generating pipeline. What is it called? And there were other workflows already that were sort of a different parts of the elephant, if you would. There was a workflow for email. There was a workflow for calling, for dialing. That was InsideSales.com. And then there was, Tout App and Yesware. So, but they're all sort of were touching different parts of the workflow. Our thesis was that generating pipelines is a numbers game. You see what I mean? And that there is so many people you're going to talk to, and then there is a conversion point, and then you have to continuously A/B test your language and your touch points and your timing and all these other things. And there was no engine for that. Like all the engines were built for marketing. So the journey from 0 to 10 was about building the category and building the awareness while you hit the $10 million revenue. 10 to 25 and 25 to 50, like at that point, the upward draft of the category creation just took us with it. And like 25 to 50 was mostly making sure that wheels didn't fall off the truck because we were growing so fast.
What year was that? When are we talking roughly?
2014 is when we pivoted. 2014 is when we built it. 2015 is when we launched it. So I guess 15 to 16 was the first 2 million. 16 to 17 was the 2 to 10. So yeah, that was the journey. And then after 100, the complications are different because it's a scale game. And, I remember when we hit 20, I think it was 25 or 50 million, that we got a valuation of $500 million, right? We did a round at a $500 million valuation, Series C, I think it was. And we're like, yeah, we're half a unicorn. I mean, and I used to joke that we're the back half of the unicorn, the one that looks like an ass to complete the picture. So yeah, it was, the journey of outreach is the journey of category creation. I don't recommend it, by the way. Like, I think it's far easier to build something that already exists and just build something easier, better to use. Like something like light for ERPs, or like linear for CRM, for project management, or like Day or Attio for CRM. I think it's easier to replace something that exists, but because when you have to look at the market that this thing doesn't exist yet, you need it, or you're doing hard miles. Not for everybody.
You say that the scale up journey was about making sure the wheels don't fall off. And I'm sure that's true. From the outside, the numbers were amazing. The product, I assume, was delivering. Like, what were the wheels that could have fallen off in that stage? And that
Dude, I hate this. And I still see startups doing the same thing. So if any startup is listening to this, write this shit down so it doesn't happen to you. When the upward draft of the market or whatever segment you're in starts taking you to high growth, you have to do the honest work and pull apart what is you and what is the market. And that shit needs to keep you up at night. Why? Because the market will change. And if you don't have control over that portion of the revenue, you don't understand clearly how is it that it is coming in, the moment it changes, you're screwed. And it's going to hit you in a bad way. So why was the wheels falling off the truck? Is because I fought against it constantly. That's how we got to 50 before I left. Every time that revenue would show up, we used to call it intra-quarter revenue. I started banning the name. I forget exactly what the name was created and closed. We had a term called created and closed revenue, which meant created and closed in the quarter. I was maniacal about minimizing the created and closed quarter and the created and closed revenue. Why? Not because I don't like money. It's because I don't like inefficient money. That money will show up and as easily would leave. And you have to understand clearly why did it come in? What problem are you solving? So if somebody's coming in and screaming, "Take my money and shut up," you don't take it. You actually, you have to put some friction in the deal to understand why is that they're buying it, who are they buying it for, what problem are we solving to make sure that we equip that customer to be successful over the long term. Before we started recording, you open up by saying, we're going to talk about fast growth companies, right? Like fast growth is everything about growth. And I sort of disagree with that coming from the other side, being in my first war and now moving into my next one. I can tell you this, the fast growth comes and goes. What really matters to make people rich is durable growth. And durable growth looks completely different than fast growth. Durable growth means that you are a workflow that learns, that you are part of some kind of operation that is existential to the business, that you're a system of record, that you're something that allows you to be durable over a long period of time. That's what everyone should be building because that's what investors pay for, not fast, durable.
All sorts of thoughts on the Lovables, the Bolts, all of these AI agents that get rapid adoption, but, we've probably all seen a sort of retention or heard the rumors of low retention, low gross margin. What are your thoughts on that? When there are these potential winner takes all markets, with huge prizes, investor cash flowing in, and growth at all costs is the mentality right now. Like, would you avoid that?
Look, I'm not qualified to advise people do or not do, because I want to make sure that we don't confuse tactics from strategy, right? So if your strategy is to own the coding platforms and your tactic is to price below your cost of operation, that's a fine, because you have access to capital, that's a fine way to play it. Matter of fact, Amazon played like that for a very long time in the public market, right? They were losing money hand over fist, and the market turned. They couldn't react fast enough. And people forget that they have to get a lifeline from Berkshire Hathaway in the form of a convertible note just to survive the downturn. And it turned out to be, it worked out fine. So does the tactic work? Of course it works. Is that a sustainable business? Of course it's not. But I don't know Anton. I don't know what he's doing. I'm sure he's enjoying the ride. But what I would advise to founders is to make sure that you understand that that's a tactic and not a way of living. Selling something that costs $1 for 50 cents is not a business. It will get you notoriety, but it's not a business.
Yeah. So before we move on to your journey with Paid, what would you say? You said you were maniacal about, this sort of quality of revenue, and maybe that's your answer to this question, but what would you say that you guys did best in that 0 to 50 million revenue journey at Outreach?
By far was category creation. And by far was being the fastest at shipping innovation as part of that category creation. So we created the category. So the category took a long time. One of the questions that people ask me, and you haven't asked me this question, I'm going to answer anyway, is like, what is category creation? When do you know that category has been created? And there's no real answer, right? Like, it's kind of like porn, you know where you see it. So it's really hard to tell like what is category creation. But one of the easy ones is when an analyst calls you category what you've been calling it, right? Eventually, your customers will start calling you the category that you invented. And that's when the category sort of like is established, if you would. The what we did right was spend thoughtful time and intention in this category creation journey. So we had a lot of discussion with my co-founders about, do we create a new category or do we attach to the existing category? So there was an existing category called revenue acceleration that was owned by InsideSales.com. The question is, are we a better InsideSales.com or are we something different? I'm a disciple at this point of a guy called Mike Maples. You probably heard of him. He's a partner of Floodgate. And he is all about being different. You have to be different. Different is a point of view. Different is a different take on the market. A lot of companies are built after the founder's own taste. And my taste is, I don't want to go compete for better. I want to go compete for different. And different, I can own 100% of whatever the size of that different is. And we were the first to the market. We were the largest sales engagement platform. And there's a bunch of others that came in and out they went. And there's a few that stuck the landing, like SalesLoft. But when we established it, it was just us. So that we got to own all the benefits of being the largest in a category that you invented. So we did that really, really well. And once the category took off, because of SDR growth, we were the de facto. So you either pick us or you have to make a choice that is not us. And that's where we want it to be.
And now with Paid.ai, presumably it's kind of a similar feeling. You're creating the category of a new way for agents to price and run payments and everything. Maybe you could explain why the old model doesn't work for agents. I mean, you touched on it briefly around almost tapping into labor budgets rather than software budgets, but maybe you could go a bit deeper on that.
So let's start with monetization. In SaaS, most monetization is done via seat, right? The software is deployed in a multi-tenant environment, and you sort of like rent a seat on that software. In agents, it changes that dynamic because you don't need a seat, meaning one seat can operate 1,000 agents. And the agents are performing the same work that a seat would do. So the seat all of a sudden doesn't become the economic measure by which you price the value that you're delivering. That's number one. The second thing is that the cost of running the agent varies based on the complexity of the task to some degree. And if you're not capturing the value correctly, then you're losing money. We're going back to like you're selling $1 for 50 cents. And again, that is not a viable business. So, right now, everyone in the agent world is sort of in land grab mode. So they're all going out there trying to grab as many new logos as you can. Not that many talk is being had around, running the business properly. But the tide has turned. You know what I mean? Like that is the one thing you can count for certain, that there will be a high tide and there will be a low tide. If you stand in the same spot by the ocean, you'll get wet. So that's what we're doing. We're picking a spot by the ocean and waiting for the tide to turn when it comes to margin management and when it comes to revenue optimization. And our twist here is a little different in that, just to finish the swing, is that I fundamentally don't believe that your backend systems need to be disparate, that your rev rec and your CPQ and your quote to cash and your billing and your quoting and your margin management and your API management and your vendor management needs to be 20 different things. I am in the rippling camp that this has to be one thing because it's one problem, it's one record. And how do you look at that record and how do you use that record is how you build this company.
James, did you have something to add to that? No. Okay. So yeah, fascinating. How have you found the adjustment going back to early stage? Like getting back to being really hacky, moving super fast, it's a very different job as you're, leading a scale up to getting a company from 0 to 1. Has that been a tough phase?
I think there's a lot of things to unlearn. There's a lot less people here that I had at Outreach. It also makes you make choices very, very, you have to make choices more frequently that are explicitly declared. So, and it's actually helping me undo a lot of my bad CEO habits. And now I see it in other CEOs of scale out companies. So for instance, if I have an idea or if I want to do something and I run it by somebody else, that person may tell me yes, right? Can we actually execute on what we have, given that we only have 14 people in a team, 50 people in a team? And the most likely answer is no. That means that we're going to have to execute on the new idea. I'm going to have to deprioritize an idea that is already on the plate to execute on the new thing. So keeping the team small as a constraint forces you to make hard choices, forces you to pick a winner. You don't have the luxury of running 3 bets at the same time to see which ones pay out. Like for instance, we are running a couple of bets simultaneously, and that's a choice. That's why we raise the money that we raise so we can have enough people to run both bets. But I can run a third. Like I can only run those 2 things. And out of those 2 things, I have to optimize where we're going to deploy our cash and our people. One of the things that I did actually is get an office here in King's Cross. And the office got only hold, I think 70 people as a max. That's it. And I'm sort of like having this conversation with the team that I don't want to move offices because the constraint on this helps us stay sharp, helps us prioritize things right and work on the maximum reward activity.
So I mean, a lot of startups and a lot of VCs are talking at the moment about constraining themselves, because they want to force their team to adopt AI and to make themselves more efficient. Like, is that something you're particularly keen for your team to do? And is it working, or is it sort of more of a dream at this stage?
We're sort of doing it, but I want to dig into that. You guys are investors. So if you give $10 million to a company, what do you expect them to do with that money? Like, where do you find the flex? Is it to hire more engineers? Or is it to hire more marketing? Like, where do you ask your companies to deploy their cash that you just gave?
Yeah, I mean, hiring, marketing, sales.
That's not an answer. That's not an answer. You're saying everything, do everything. That's not an answer.
Well,
what are you asking them to focus on?
I'd say it's people and product just at the beginning.
Okay.
In the stage we're investing in, usually it's people and product.
So 2 things, people and product. No, go to market, not marketing, right? So you're not going to go buy ads.
No, I mean, not initially. I would say the next round would probably, it depends on how quickly. At the beginning, I would say I want to see more investment in product than growth. Because I believe in that durable growth piece, which is like go and build something really meaningful, really understand the customer problem and like really get close to them and, don't try and scale too early. Make sure you get really like you actually have genuine advantage in the market once you start to press on the gas.
So if I take your money and I blow it on ads on Times Square, you're going to be mad at me, right?
I would say, yeah, I'd be annoyed about that. Yeah, probably. At the stage we're investing in it, yeah.
We might have a laugh about it, but
yeah. I mean, once the money's gone, it's gone, bro. Like, they're not coming back.
Yeah, I mean, that would definitely, at the stage we're investing in, that would definitely be a jump too early.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of it. Like, you have to, it's not people, it's like people where and doing what, and what do you expect? You run on milestones, right? So what is your next milestone? In your case, you guys are early stage, so presumably your next milestone is a funding round. Is that how you think about it, or you want to be the last
Well, I mean,
dollar in the door?
the funding round is a product of the milestone. It's a milestone in itself as well, but you need to achieve milestones to get the funding round.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. So what's your hypothesis coming into a company? Is it a funding round or
It's revenue. The thesis ultimately is around revenue. Do we think that this solves a human need that enough people are suffering from and can make people money, save people time?
got it. Got it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the next funding round is a score. It's it's marking some of your homework or some of your work, but it's only as a step to the next phase. It's not really, the job's not done, but it
Right.
definitely, if the company does a massive up round, then you're thinking, yeah, we did a good job there, basically, but you're still years away from realizing the full potential. So
Got it. Got it. So you're not coming in. That's not your hypothesis coming in, right? I'm going to invest here and I'm not expecting you to raise again. I'm expecting you to drive revenue. And if you raise again, that's just, high fives all around.
Most of the companies we're investing in, we would expect them to raise multiple rounds because they're getting on that hamster wheel of venture. And so but they've got to hit some milestones. We're expecting them to build a great product, and those milestones kind of naturally come through. And then we've got to believe that they have the right profile and the right ability to attract more capital further down the line, whether they hit 5 million ARR or 1 million ARR, but as long as they've got the right product, they can still raise that next round. It depends on the category, the person. There's a lot to it. The business model, we do consumer and B2B. So it's very variable, but yeah, people and products is where most of the capital is spent.
Got it. So this is my point of view, and this is just one view, is that there's only two ways a product grows, especially in B2B, either by self-serve adoption, people call it product-led, or by selling. If you're selling and you need to throw more dollars to hire your reps, ramp them and get into sale, it better be an enterprise sale and you better clear the 4X target of like OTE versus quota. If that criteria is not met, you should not drop a dime into that company until you hit that criteria. Or you self-serve, in which case, go for it, girl, and just keep growing. Anything that doesn't land on one camp or the other, it's not a durable business. And you just stop doing whatever you're doing until you become a durable business. That's my criteria now for growth for pay.
And which one's been more successful? Has it been having an amazing domain, which gives you great brand recognition, which then drives good self-adoption? Or has it been more hit the phones, let's get the word out there, we're the dominant force in this space?
So where we are right now at this point in time, we haven't launched officially our self-serve. We're building it. So in that case, we're finalizing the product and making sure that the product has a fit to the self-serve needs of agent builders. And for the part that we're selling, we haven't hit efficiency yet, meaning my deal cycles are not predictable. My ACV is too low for where it needs to be a successful sold product. We just closed a deal that hit that mark, that was within the sales cycle time that will be acceptable and within the ACV band that will be acceptable. Let me pump $2 million into that within those constraints, and I'll tell you that I'm winning. But right now that said, at Outreach, it took me 2 years to get this dial, right? So I know a bunch of shortcuts now to how to get there more quickly, et cetera. But in terms of all the efficiency things that I want to see before we scale, we're not quite there yet, but I can see the light at the end of that tunnel on how we get there. Like I now have a path on how to get there. I didn't have a path like almost a week ago. Now I can see it.
Oh, only in the last week. That's cool. So what really changed? Was it just having a customer hit those numbers, or did you change something to help define who that customer should be to then go, okay, that's what we need?
No. So in every organization that is doing a considered purchase, meaning this is not a purchase that you have to make, on a recurring basis, but it's a purchase that is something that you're sold because you identified a pain, et cetera. You have to find what the persona is that allows you the quickest sales cycle, right? And for us, I finally figure out, which is hilarious to be frank, that the quickest sales cycle to sell Paid into an organization that is going to buy Paid as opposed to self-serve is the commercial team. I always thought it would be the technical team or the product team, but it turns out it's a commercial team. Why is it a commercial team? It makes sense in retrospect because they're selling agentic products, and agentic products are sold differently. And more importantly, agentic products are bought differently, meaning when you buy an agentic product, you're trying to solve an actual pain. So you don't buy a general seat to solve a general basket of problems of which one of them is yours. You're actually buying the agent to solve this particular thing. So it has to be sold differently, which means that your stack to monetize that agent, to track that agent, to success that agent, to give to your team has to be different to meet the customer's needs. So that's the big unlock in like the past 2 weeks is that I'm back to selling to salespeople, which is where I came from. But I know how to do that and I know how to do that quickly. I know how to bring a bunch of people along and do that quickly too. So now that I know that, I know how to scale.
And you're building infra for agent native businesses. And what exactly is the pain point that you're solving for? Are these businesses currently trying to hack together old Stripe to take payments and they're sort of duct taping different things together? And is that the problem in and of itself? Or are there a bunch of adjacent problems that come about when people don't use a solution like Paid?
Yeah. So there's two core personas. And this is why I open up by saying, I raised to chase is two problems. One is you're an agent builder. If you're starting from scratch, right? So you get yourself some A8N and you start building against a particular problem set. You get yourself some eval, you get some data sets, you work with customers to get a good product market fit on your agent and you ship it, you sell it, right? Those people install Stripe at 2 a.m. in the morning because somebody's about to make a payment, right? So you quickly get Stripe instrumented and boom, you take that first payment, you call it a win, and then second payment comes in. Second payment looks nothing like the first. Is because they're buying your agent for a different sets of reasons, and now they want to pay you differently. So now you have to create a different SKU in Stripe, and you have to track it separately. And then a third comes in and wants to pay you by outcome, and then a fourth comes in and wants to pay you by this activity that really matters to them, and then a fifth comes in and wants to pay you by this different thing, and all of a sudden you have a nightmare, right? Your team is not building anymore by like contorting Stripe into an unbelievable pretzel to be able to actually like just do the work that you're trying to do. Our problem is solved by instrumenting the entirety of the agent and then allowing you to, in a visual representation, monetize in any way your customer wants, which was problematic. Problem step number two is slightly different. Now you have SaaS companies that are selling per seat or some kind of hybrid consumption model, now shifting into agents. Why? Because seats are flat, right? Seats are going down. So how do I sell those agents? You're back to the same problem that you had with the agent builders. People are buying agents to solve particular problems. Your Zora, ChargeV, Salesforce billing stack is not designed to sell the way the customer wants to buy. And the way the customer wants to buy is the way the customer wants to buy. But it's also the way the customer wants to be success. So the way they bought it is the way they want to come and renew for you. And you don't have the instrumentation to go track that. So we sell you that whole solution in one box. Those are the two core problems in front of us right now.
And are you able to share how many agents there are and how many you've managed to sign up? Because there'll be people listening and go, yeah, I've heard of agents, but is that a big thing? But obviously it's becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. So have you managed to kind of map the market and how many customers have you started to work with?
So it's interesting because it's like counting stars a little bit at this point. There's two pieces to it. So every SaaS company in the planet has to eventually shift to an agentic solution. And this is just gravity. The number of seats pressing buttons going down. And it goes down at different rates depending on the industry. So they have to make that shift. And then on the other hand, in every problem that you see in the world, from, fixing the audio quality of the podcast all the way to, making sure that your clothes get delivered on time via a truck that is moving from Coventry to Edinburgh, has to be booked by somebody. And now that's done by an agent too. So it's a little bit like building the matrix that now you cannot unsee the fact that there are agents everywhere. And every job is going to be done by an agent within the next 5 years.
How do you think that timing is in the market where, you've got to be one of the first, because if you're not, then someone else will be. But by being the first, you risk a sort of gestation period that is slow. How did you sort of get comfortable with that trade-off?
That's a great question. I change my mind every day. on both sides, and that I think sometimes I'm late, sometimes I'm early. And I also think that, why am I so, if I'm early, how early I am? I'm early enough to die without seeing the returns, or I'm early enough to pick it up before the wave comes in. I don't have a great answer for you other than because I am a repeat founder, I'm able to raise enough funds to see this through. So for instance, if it takes 10 years to get here, I'll be fine. Why am I going to be fine? A, because I have enough cash in the bank, and B, because I can take what I have, modify it a little bit and sell it.
I think that's spot on, because I think for us as investors, when you're taking market timing risk, that has to be part of the equation. Is, can this founder raise capital, and will people believe in this founder even if things are slow for 5 years?
100%.
Yeah.
Look, guys, like, I don't know your job. I don't want to be an investor. I think I would suck at it. But like, I don't know how to solve that equation, right? Because like the way that you cover your risk is putting a little bit of money at risk, right? You say, I'm just going to give you $2 million, right? Like if he doesn't get a customer in the next 5 years, those $2 million are gone. You see what I mean? So the real answer is you either put in 10 or you put in nothing. You see what I mean? You can create a little group of people that is going to put in 10 and see this through, or you shouldn't even play, because giving that founder $2 million is a death sentence. That founder's going to take those $2 million and try to make the best of it. And if this timing is wrong, which most likely will be, both are gone.
And the environment changes so much. I mean, sat from where we are today, it seems like an inevitability that a product like Paid is going to be required. But there'll be, the market is dynamic, right? In 5 years' time, there'll be many other solutions. There'll be potentially off the shelf ways that companies can build this themselves. There may be incumbent payment companies who move into the space. Getting comfortable with all of those things is just really difficult for investors to do. And it comes back to that same point. You've got to really back that you're investing in the right horse who can overcome all those obstacles.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. And like, I have a story on why our technology is different and like, why is it hard for an incumbent to catch up? But that doesn't need to be true. I mean, Stripe can easily, understand what I'm doing and just put the right people on it and blow me out of the water. So there is all sorts of risk. You just take in risk that you can out execute and out market to the right people with the right time, with the right focus, with the right team, and see the other side. And this is the interesting thing, is you don't have to see the other side completely, right? You just have to be known for a sliver of a problem that you're the best at solving. So when we came to the market, Salesforce copied us within 3 years. They created something called sequences, and they had a sequencing product, et cetera. And at that point, I had a choice, right? I could either sue them for patent infringement, because we actually had a patent on the whole thing, or we could just out execute it. And we decided to just go for the execution game. And they still can't get their act together on even agents, let alone, sales workflows. So that's my preferred method of winning, or like play. That's my playbook. You know what I mean? I was like, just out execute everybody.
I think it's really easy to underestimate the power of a really targeted brand and marketing efforts in a new category, where the temptation to believe that an incumbent can build this and execute well on it is there, but it's pretty unlikely. Stripe, yes, they have huge existing distribution, but this would be one product diluted by the 1,000 other products that they have in their go-to-market approach. In the eyes of customers, it's just a simpler proposition going for the player who does this and this and this only.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And most importantly, you're not taking on the whole of Stripe in this case as a competitor. You're just taking this tiny sliver of market that you think is going to be big at some point, that you're doing the best job at. And that's exactly when we started Outreach. So we took this tiny market, which are the people who are generating pipeline for A's, right? And that was tiny. And there were very few people who were doing it. And then eventually it became a thing. And that's the bet, right?
Yeah.
Like that this will eventually become a thing.
So to flip the question slightly, so at Outreach, you must have seen startups doing that to you, taking slivers of new markets that should have been yours, and where you would then run experiments, build a product team, build a go-to-market team around that new product and see if you could out execute. Like, did you experience that? And were you successful in it?
All the time. I feel like, I mean, I don't know if this is to be edited out, but I feel like I've been at war for 100 years. I only known like fucking, always some shit. And like when we were born, we were competing with incumbents. And then as we grew, we were competing with the new guys. And then eventually we became the incumbent, and then everybody was taking pot shots at us. So it's just like, it's just what you do, like So I was born in a competitive environment. So like I'd never not known being in a hyper competitive environment. So you just have to like adapt and just make it part of like your everyday life, you know?
Can you think of any of the startups that did crop up where you thought, holy shit, they're actually crushing it. We're in danger here.
No, but I do actually ask my team here to look at what companies we admire and we can borrow from. Like I actually, one of the things that I took away from my last set of co-founders is that we were very eager in steal. Have you heard? There's a book called "Steal Like an Artist," and I love stealing like that concept, like steal like an artist. So Picasso stole like an artist, Dali stole like an artist. So like we look at what everybody's doing right and we try to copy it because we're gonna have our own good original ideas that are gonna generate alpha, but there's some other people have had great ideas that are gonna generate alpha. So why not? So I love that. So even the people who are tangentially competitors or coming into the market, they all have great ideas and we should not be too precious. So just, if we like it, just lift it and use it.
Yeah, Manny, well, I've got so many questions I want to try and get on, but we've only got 10 minutes. So I've got two that I really want to ask. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is, we just talked about it really, was sort of fundraising, and common mistake actually is first time founders who feel like they can't raise the capital. So they try and raise less, and then that gives them less runway, and then they've got lower chance of success and everything. Actually, it's quite refreshing to someone in your seat say, actually, you need the money because capital can be an advantage and we need that to survive and everything. So we want venture capital to be understood in its own asset class and
Mhm.
and deliver what it was supposed to do, not just every founder thinking they need to raise money and raise a little bit. So I thought that was really helpful to have you say that. But last time we spoke, your own fundraising journey was a little bit kind of hush hush because you had mega funds kind of like offering you lots of term sheets and stuff. Are you able to share your fundraising journey with Paid.ai, and how different was it this time around following the success of Outreach?
So it was clearly easier because I'd done it before and I raised a lot of capital at Outreach. I don't think that I would do that again. Outreach, I was a first time founder and I was learning the job. Here, you're hiring me as a seasoned hand at the problem. So I think that the journey was a little bit different in that I knew what I knew. I also know the stages at which the money should be coming in. I also know everybody in Sand Hill Road, up and down. So I know who to call for what purpose, for what amount of money. And if I can't get to that person, I know somebody who knows that person. So, so to me, it was a staging of risk, right? Just like same for you. What was the first unlock that I had was that um, I called a bunch of people to get validation. Even I called one of my co-founders who's sitting right over there and he told me not to do it. So like I got a lot of feedback, right? As to why not, what's in, what's out. And then my wife told me to take some time off, that I shouldn't be jumping from thing to thing, that it shouldn't be a rebounding activity, but I should be falling in love with something, right? So she sent me off to spend time with my friend in Spain. I spent time with him. And instead of like hanging out, I just started calling agentic companies to see what kind of problems they had. And at the end of that 2 weeks, I had a list of all the problems I had around monetization, margin management, landing pilots, expanding pilots. And so I just had a catalog of problems. So I showed up to EQT and Sequoia. EQT was an intro through one of my great friends and now chairman of my board, Stefan Heidenreich, who made an intro to EQT. And he said, like, you just tell them what you're doing. And I said, look, I don't have a deck. I just have this catalog of problems that need to be fixed. And if it's not me, somebody else is going to fix it. And I feel like I can get to it first because I understand the problems really well. No deck, just the problems. That's it. That was a fundraiser. I talked to EQT. I called Pat Grady. I told him I have a catalog of problems. These are the problems. You don't need a deck. These are the problems. Like, I'm going to go solve them. This is my hypothesis. I'm going to go solve them. That should trigger a pre-seed round, like right there. You see what I mean? And that's why I did it. Then you go solve those problems one by one. You don't need to solve 20 of them. You need to solve a couple for a handful of diversified basket of customers. And then that should trigger the next round or not if you still have cash in the bank because you're sort of chipping away at the risk, right? And if all is left is distribution risk at the end of your fundraising, you're good to go. Yeah, I mean, that's a well-known and understood equation. Like all the other technical problems, do the problem exist? Will people pay for blah, 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 blah. Like you should like take it. You should chip away at that problem early on with the first dollar you have. And once you're done with those problems, then you just go kill it. Just go on the market.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And yeah, just obsessing over the problems is such a good just soundbite. And then I wanted to ask about you personally. You're clearly incredibly good at storytelling, sales, fundraising. What would you say is your?
It's all sales. Like the whole thing that you said.
It's all sales.
It's all sales.
But is that your superpower? Is that's what kind of what I want to? You're a successful founder. You've had successful career prior to being a founder. But as a founder, is that your edge?
I don't know, because I don't know if that's my edge. I think it's the one thing that I obsess about. Like I understand it and love it. I read about it. I talk to other salespeople. I take notes. Everybody has a thing that you're passionate about. For some it's golf. For some is, a sport or a craft or a hobby. For me it's sales. Like I love not only sales, but I love good salesmanship. I love good process. I love good books about sales. I'm a sucker for like tips and tricks, and like, I just consume it all. And
Does that then fall into loving building stuff for salespeople as well? Because they're kind of like, you're the Pied Piper of salespeople in that scenario.
no, I know that means that I like to sell stuff that people want. You know what I mean? Or I like to sell stuff that, or even more importantly, I like to sell stuff that makes somebody aware to solve a problem that they didn't think it was possible to solve. Like for me, those are dopamine hits. Where you can make somebody see something they weren't seeing, and all of a sudden they're better off as a company, as a person, as an executive because of that interaction. Dude, I can do that all day. And this is why I love being in the river that I'm swimming in, is that we have 5 to 10 agentic conversations a day, and they're all unlocks to some degree for me and for the customer.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we could literally go on for hours. We've got so many other things we'd love to tap onto, but we're going to go into our 2 final questions. So the first is, you're obviously incredibly well connected. You must see lots of cool companies coming through and starting from friends of yours and things like that. Is there another future unicorn that you're aware of that, is at this earliest part of its journey, but you think could be massive?
I'm going to shout out my boys at Artifact. They're down the hall from us. They're doing a launch party tomorrow here at the Fora. So be there or be square. It's here in King's Cross on Friday, 5 o'clock.
Are they doing accounting?
They're doing accounting agents, and they're crushing it. We get to see, look, we use the forward deploy model. So we get to see everyone's tech, and theirs is well thought out, superior, good team. They're gonna go somewhere. I think that I'm super excited about that.
We should get them on the podcast.
100%.
Yeah, they sound great. I knew about them, but I haven't had much engagement with the team. But yeah, it sounds really cool. And then our final question, Manny, is our dinner party guest game. So if you could have dinner with any 3 people, who would they be?
That's a good one. Any 3 people. I would love to have dinner. Think about that. Look, I really appreciate, I would like to bring Steve Jobs back. I would love to have dinner with him. And you didn't say if they were alive of that. I would love to have dinner with him. I would love to have dinner with, Elon Musk. I think he's done incredible things. He may be a weird companion for my dinner, but it's my choice.
Have you ever met him before?
I have, actually. When I took the DFJ round, they invited me to a party and he was in it. And he's not very talkative, if you know what I'm saying. And he's massive. He's really tall. So
Is he?
Yeah, super big. And the other one who's fascinating is Daniel Kahneman. I read his book. I reread his book, and he just knows. He's catch him before he passes on too, because he's pretty old.
Awesome. That was great. Thank you for sharing that. Manny, thank you so much for the whole episode. There's so much insight into how you built Outreach and then now what you're doing with Paid.ai. It's so interesting because there'll be lots of people listening who are either building agents, thinking about building agents, using agents at work. And there's this whole new transition that needs to happen into how they're priced and paid for and everything. So it's going to be incredible to see Paid.ai go on that journey. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Manny.
Yeah, thank you. That was awesome.